The United States and Saudi Arabia, two nations seemingly worlds apart, yet bound together by a complex and often controversial alliance. This partnership, with its roots deep in the oil fields of the Arabian Desert, has shaped global politics and economics for nearly a century. It is a relationship born of necessity, fueled by mutual interests, and shadowed by ethical dilemmas. The story begins in the 1930s, a time of global economic turmoil and burgeoning demand for oil. American companies, recognizing the vast reserves hidden beneath the Saudi sands, embarked on ambitious exploration projects. This marked the beginning of a strategic partnership that would redefine the geopolitical landscape. The discovery of oil in Saudi Arabia was not just an economic boon, it was the genesis of a relationship that would entwine the destinies of these two nations. The flow of oil from Saudi Arabia to the United States became a lifeline, fueling American industry and powering its rise to global superpower status. In return, the United States offered protection and support to the fledgling Saudi kingdom. This exchange of energy for security formed the bedrock of the US-Saudi alliance, a relationship that would weather countless storms and shape the course of history. As the world emerged from the ashes of World War II, a new conflict cast its long shadow across the globe: the Cold War. The United States and the Soviet Union, locked in an ideological struggle for supremacy, sought to expand their spheres of influence. In this bipolar world, Saudi Arabia emerged as a pivotal player, its vast oil reserves making it a prize coveted by both superpowers. The United States, recognizing the strategic importance of Saudi Arabia, doubled down on its commitment to the kingdom's security. Military bases were established, arms deals were struck, and intelligence sharing intensified. The US-Saudi alliance, forged in the crucible of the oil fields, was now tempered by the fires of the Cold War. Saudi Arabia, for its part, saw in the United States a powerful protector against Soviet encroachment and regional rivals. The kingdom became a bulwark against communist expansion in the Middle East, its oil wealth funding anti-communist initiatives and propping up pro-Western regimes. The US-Saudi alliance, once rooted in economic expediency, had evolved into a strategic partnership of global significance. The horrific events of September 11, 2001, shook the United States to its core and cast a dark shadow over the US-Saudi alliance. The revelation that 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi nationals, coupled with allegations of Saudi government involvement in financing terrorist groups, ignited a firestorm of controversy. Public opinion in the US soured, and calls for a reassessment of the relationship grew louder. Despite the strains, the US-Saudi alliance endured. The shared threat of terrorism, particularly from Al-Qaeda and its offshoots, compelled both nations to cooperate on counter-terrorism efforts. Intelligence sharing intensified, and Saudi Arabia took steps to crack down on terrorist financing within its borders. However, the wounds of 9/11s ran deep, and the US-Saudi relationship never fully recovered its pre-9/11 footing. The specter of Saudi involvement in terrorism continued to haunt the alliance, fueling mistrust and resentment on both sides. The US-Saudi partnership, once seemingly unbreakable, had entered a new era of uncertainty and unease. Beyond the corridors of power and the headlines of international diplomacy, Saudi Arabia has cultivated a more subtle yet equally potent form of influence in the United States lobbying. Through a sophisticated and well-funded network of lobbyists, public relations firms and think tanks, Saudi Arabia seeks to shape American perceptions, policies, and ultimately, its interests. These efforts are often aimed at burnishing Saudi Arabia's image, promoting its strategic importance, and deflecting criticism of its human rights record. Saudi-funded lobbyists work tirelessly to cultivate relationships with lawmakers, congressional staffers, and administration officials, providing them with carefully crafted narratives and policy recommendations that align with Saudi interests. This influence extends beyond the halls of Congress. Saudi Arabia also targets American public opinion through public relations campaigns, cultural exchanges, and charitable donations. By projecting a positive image of Saudi Arabia and its people, these efforts aim to foster goodwill and understanding, thereby creating a more favorable environment for Saudi interests in the United States. Section $5 and Diplomacy: The flow of Saudi money into U.S. politics. The influence of money in American politics is undeniable, and Saudi Arabia has not shied away from leveraging its vast wealth to advance its interests in Washington. While direct contributions from foreign governments to U.S. political campaigns are illegal, Saudi Arabia has found other avenues to funnel money into the American political system, often exploiting loopholes and pushing the boundaries of campaign finance laws. One such avenue is through donations to think tanks and policy organizations, many of which have close ties to U.S. policymakers. These donations, often in the millions of dollars, can shape the research agenda of these organizations, influencing the policy debates in Washington and swaying the views of lawmakers. Another channel for Saudi influence is through contributions to charitable foundations and other nonprofit organizations that have ties to U.S. politicians or their families. While these donations are often framed as philanthropic gestures, they can serve as a backdoor for currying favor and gaining access to influential figures. Section 6. Beyond oil, Saudi Arabia's economic footprint in the U.S. Saudi Arabia's economic influence in the United States extends far beyond its role as an oil supplier. Over the decades, the kingdom has amassed a vast portfolio of investments in the U.S., spanning a wide range of sectors, including real estate, technology, finance, and entertainment. This economic footprint gives Saudi Arabia significant leverage in the U.S. economy and strengthens its hand in bilateral relations. One of the most visible manifestations of Saudi investment in the U.S. is its vast real estate holdings. Saudi princes, businessmen, and government-linked entities own billions of dollars worth of prime real estate in major cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. These investments not only generate substantial income for Saudi investors, but also give them a stake in the economic well-being of these cities. Beyond real estate, Saudi Arabia has poured billions into U.S. technology companies, sovereign wealth funds, and private equity firms. These investments give Saudi Arabia a seat at the table in some of the most innovative and influential sectors of the U.S. economy, allowing it to shape the direction of technological development and potentially gain access to sensitive technologies. Section 7. A clash of values, human rights, and the U.S.-Saudi relationship. The U.S.-Saudi alliance has long been a source of moral and ethical dilemmas for the United States. Saudi Arabia's abysmal human rights record, characterized by the suppression of dissent, discrimination against women and religious minorities, and the use of torture, stands in stark contrast to the values of democracy, freedom, and human rights that the United States purports to uphold. This clash of values has led to growing calls from human rights groups, lawmakers, and segments of the American public for the U.S. to reassess its relationship with Saudi Arabia. Critics argue that by continuing to support the Saudi regime, the U.S. is complicit in its human rights abuses and undermines its own moral standing in the world. The U.S. government has faced a delicate balancing act, seeking to maintain its strategic relationship with Saudi Arabia while also expressing its concerns about the kingdom's human rights practices. However, the U.S. has often been accused of prioritizing its strategic interests over its commitment to human rights, turning a blind eye to Saudi abuses in the name of preserving the alliance. Section 8. The global stage Saudi influence on U.S. foreign policy. The U.S.-Saudi alliance has profound implications not only for the bilateral relationship, but also for U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East and beyond. Saudi Arabia's influence on U.S. foreign policy decisions is undeniable, particularly when it comes to issues such as oil production, counter-terrorism, and regional conflicts. Saudi Arabia's vast oil reserves give it significant leverage over global energy markets, and the kingdom has often used its oil weapon to influence U.S. foreign policy. For example, during the 1973 oil crisis, Saudi Arabia led an oil embargo against the U.S. and other Western countries in retaliation for their support of Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Beyond oil, Saudi Arabia exerts influence on U.S. foreign policy through its role as a major arms purchaser, its close ties to other Gulf Arab states, and its financial clout. The kingdom has often used its influence to shape U.S. policy in the region, sometimes pushing the U.S. towards more hawkish stances that align with Saudi interests. Section 9. Families of Influence Case Studies in Saudi Power. Understanding Saudi Arabia's influence requires examining powerful families shaping its relationship with the U.S. The Alion family rose during the U.S.-Saudi oil boom, amassing a diverse fortune. Prince Alwaleed bin Talal built a global investment empire. The Sharbatly family diversified from fruit vendors to real estate moguls. These families exemplify Saudi power's impact on America. Their stories reveal the intersection of Saudi and U.S. interests.